"You can stop my steps, officer, but you cannot stop the truth from walking through those courthouse doors." The sentence drifted across the cool morning air with such quiet certainty that several people instinctively slowed down before they even understood what had happened. At exactly 8:38 on a clear Monday morning, the broad marble plaza outside the United States Federal Courthouse in downtown Chicago pulsed with its usual rhythm. Attorneys hurried toward security carrying polished leather briefcases. Federal employees balanced coffee cups while checking the time on their phones. Television reporters prepared for unrelated interviews across the street. Tourists paused to photograph the towering white columns rising beneath a bright American flag that moved steadily in the breeze. It looked like every ordinary weekday until Officer Ryan Mitchell stepped directly into the path of a black woman approaching the courthouse entrance. "Ma'am, put your briefcase on the ground and step over here," he said in a firm voice that carried farther than he intended. The woman stopped immediately. She neither protested nor appeared frightened. Instead, she slowly adjusted the strap of her well-worn leather briefcase and looked at the officer with calm brown eyes that revealed remarkable composure. She wore a charcoal gray business suit that was neat but modest, comfortable black shoes, and no jewelry beyond a simple silver watch. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or celebrity. She looked like another professional beginning another workday. Yet there was something impossible to ignore about the confidence with which she carried herself. "Good morning, officer," Maya Johnson replied politely. "May I ask why I have been stopped?" Ryan did not answer the question. His attention remained fixed on her briefcase before returning to her face. "Please place your bag on the ground." Maya nodded without hesitation. She carefully lowered the briefcase onto the smooth stone pavement, keeping every movement slow and respectful. Nearby pedestrians continued walking at first, but curiosity spread quickly. A young college student waiting for a city bus quietly lifted her phone. An elderly couple approaching the courthouse entrance paused near the security line. A local television cameraman, originally preparing equipment for another assignment, slowly turned his lens toward the growing scene. Ryan folded his arms. Identification. Maya reached calmly into her handbag and produced her driver's license without rushing. She handed it to him with steady hands and waited patiently while he examined it. His eyes moved repeatedly between the photograph and the woman standing before him. Something about her calm demeanor unsettled him. During more than 20 years in law enforcement, he had become accustomed to reading nervous voices, defensive explanations, and hurried gestures. Maya displayed none of them. She simply waited. "What brings you here today?" Ryan finally asked. "Official business," she answered. "What kind of official business?" Maya smiled gently. "Business I am scheduled to conduct inside this courthouse." Ryan's expression hardened. "That is not specific enough." She remained perfectly composed. "Officer, I am happy to cooperate with any lawful request. May I know the reason for these questions?" The words were respectful, almost gentle, yet they carried an unmistakable confidence that caused another attorney walking past to glance back toward them. More people began slowing their pace. The courthouse security officers watched from a distance without interfering. Maya never raised her voice. She never stepped closer. She simply stood beneath the morning sunlight with quiet dignity, allowing the silence between each answer to speak for itself. Ryan looked around the plaza. Hundreds of people continued entering the courthouse after routine screening. Yet his attention remained fixed on Maya. Deep inside, he believed he was following instinct. He did not realize that instinct unsupported by evidence could quietly become something far more dangerous. "I need you to wait here," he said. Maya nodded once more. "I will wait, officer." Minutes passed. The crowd slowly grew. A reporter whispered to a producer. Two law students exchanged uncertain glances. A courthouse maintenance employee paused his work long enough to observe the unusual delay. The wind lifted a few autumn leaves across the marble steps, while sunlight reflected from the courthouse windows, filling the entrance with warm golden light. Maya looked briefly toward the American flag above the building before returning her attention to Ryan. There was no anger in her expression, only patience shaped by years of experience. She had learned long ago that character often revealed itself most clearly when another person underestimated it. Ryan handed back her identification, but made no effort to clear the path. Instead, he looked directly into her eyes and asked another question. Do you expect me to believe you just happened to be here this morning? Maya accepted her license with both hands, placed it carefully inside her wallet, and answered with the same quiet respect that had defined every word since the encounter began. Officer, I came here expecting to meet the law. I did not expect to spend my morning proving that it should recognize me too. Maya Johnson did not respond immediately to Officer Ryan Mitchell's final question. Instead, she allowed the quiet that followed to settle naturally across the courthouse plaza. She had learned many years earlier that silence often revealed more than arguments ever could. The morning breeze carried the distant sound of city traffic while sunlight slowly climbed the white marble columns standing above the federal courthouse entrance. Around them, people continued watching with growing curiosity. Some pretended to check messages on their phones while keeping one eye on the unfolding encounter. Others simply stopped walking altogether. Ryan studied Maya's face once again. He expected irritation. He expected frustration. He expected the defensive body language he had seen countless times throughout his career. Instead, he found only patience. That calm unsettled him more than open disagreement ever could. Maya finally answered in a steady voice. Officer, I came here because I have responsibilities that matter to many people. I also believe every citizen deserves to enter a public building without first proving they belong there. Her words were neither emotional nor confrontational. They were spoken with the confidence of someone who had repeated the same principles throughout an entire lifetime. Few people standing nearby knew anything about the woman quietly waiting beside the courthouse steps. They saw an ordinary black professional carrying an old leather briefcase. They did not know she had spent years studying constitutional law while working evening jobs to pay tuition. They did not know that every achievement she earned had required twice the preparation because she understood how often first impressions became permanent judgments. Earlier that same morning, long before sunrise reached downtown Chicago, Maya had awakened inside the modest apartment she shared with her widowed mother. The apartment overlooked a quiet neighborhood where children rode bicycles after school and neighbors greeted one another by name. Nothing inside suggested luxury. Every room reflected careful organization, discipline, and gratitude. Law books filled one bookshelf beside framed family photographs. A small wooden dining table held handwritten legal notes, neatly stacked case files, and a steaming mug of coffee prepared before dawn. Maya believed that preparation was another way of showing respect, both for herself and for the people depending on her work. Before leaving home, she had helped her mother water the small plants resting beside the kitchen window. Her mother smiled warmly while handing her a container of homemade breakfast. "You always forget to eat when you have court," she said gently. Maya laughed softly. "You know me too well." Her mother adjusted the collar of Maya's charcoal gray jacket before speaking words she had repeated since Maya was a little girl. Never allow another person's opinion to become louder than your own character. Maya carried those words with her every day. They remained in her thoughts during difficult exams, challenging court appearances, and moments when strangers underestimated her before she ever introduced herself. After leaving home, she had driven through the quiet streets beneath the first colors of sunrise, mentally reviewing legal arguments she had practiced for weeks. Every page, inside her worn leather briefcase, had been carefully arranged the night before. Every citation had been checked twice. Every question had been anticipated. She had expected a demanding day inside the courtroom. She had not expected the first challenge to arrive outside its doors. Back on the courthouse plaza, Ryan slowly handed her driver's license back once more after examining it longer than necessary. Maya accepted it with both hands, thanked him politely, and placed it inside her wallet without displaying the slightest sign of impatience. The crowd noticed everything. A middle-aged attorney quietly whispered to a colleague that the woman being questioned appeared remarkably composed. A courthouse employee paused near the security entrance, sensing that the delay had become unusual. Even a television cameraman lowered his equipment for a moment, surprised by how respectfully the conversation continued despite the growing tension. Ryan looked toward the courthouse entrance where dozens of visitors entered after routine screening. Then he looked back at Maya. Something about the contrast unsettled him, but instead of reconsidering, he asked another question. "How often do you come to this courthouse?" Maya answered honestly, "As often as my work requires." "And what work is that?" Ryan asked. Maya smiled with quiet courtesy. Work that serves the law, officer. The answer sounded simple, yet something about the confidence behind it caused several people nearby to exchange thoughtful glances. No one knew exactly who Maya Johnson was. But with every passing minute, more people began realizing that the calm woman standing before them possessed something far greater than status. She possessed the rare confidence that comes only from knowing both the law and her own worth. Officer Ryan Mitchell narrowed his eyes as Maya Johnson finished speaking, but instead of ending the conversation, he seemed even more determined to continue it. The confidence in her voice did not sound rehearsed. It sounded earned, and somehow that unsettled him far more than nervous excuses ever could. He glanced once more at the courthouse entrance where a steady line of attorneys, government employees, jurors, and visitors continued passing through routine security without interruption. Then he looked back at Maya as though trying to solve a puzzle that refused to fit the conclusion he had already formed. "Open your briefcase," he said. Maya answered immediately. "Certainly, officer." She bent slowly, released the worn brass clasps, and carefully lifted the lid. Inside rested neatly organized legal folders separated by colored tabs, a leather notebook filled with handwritten annotations, several bound case files, a copy of the United States Constitution with dozens of page markers, and a fountain pen resting inside a protective sleeve. Everything inside reflected precision rather than disorder. Ryan examined the contents from where he stood. He found nothing suspicious, yet he remained unconvinced. "Who are these files for?" he asked. Maya closed the briefcase halfway before answering. "They are part of today's court schedule." "Which case?" Ryan continued. Maya looked directly at him with steady eyes. "I am not permitted to discuss confidential legal matters outside the courtroom." The answer was respectful, but it offered him nothing he could use to satisfy the doubts growing in his own mind. A second police officer, Officer Daniel Hayes, noticed the unusual gathering and walked over from the opposite side of the security perimeter. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. Ryan nodded without looking away from Maya. "Routine verification." Daniel glanced at the open briefcase, then at Maya's calm expression, and finally toward the crowd that had quietly doubled in size over the past several minutes. Several law students stood together whispering. A television photographer adjusted his tripod. An elderly woman waiting for jury duty folded her newspaper and watched silently. The atmosphere no longer resembled an ordinary security stop. It felt like everyone sensed that an invisible line had been crossed, even if they could not yet explain why. Daniel lowered his voice. "Federal security has not requested assistance." Ryan answered firmly. "I am still handling it." Maya listened without interruption. She had spent years inside courtrooms, where emotions often determined the outcome long before facts had the opportunity to speak. Her mentors had taught her that composure was not weakness. It was discipline. She remembered her first day in law school when one professor challenged every student with the same sentence. "The strongest argument usually belongs to the calmest person in the room." She had carried that lesson into every difficult conversation since then. The morning sunlight continued climbing higher across the courthouse facade, turning the marble steps into sheets of pale gold. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe, while autumn leaves rolled quietly across the plaza. Maya looked briefly toward the courthouse clock. The hearing would begin soon. Months of preparation rested inside the briefcase at her feet, yet she refused to show frustration. Her responsibility extended beyond winning a case. She also represented the values she believed the legal system should protect. Ryan handed back her identification one final time, but still did not move aside. "How do I know you are telling me the truth?" he asked. Maya accepted the license with both hands and answered without hesitation. "Because every answer I have given you can be verified through lawful procedure." Daniel looked at Ryan again, uncertainty becoming more visible across his face. "Maybe courthouse administration can confirm her appointment," he suggested quietly. Ryan remained silent. Pride had begun competing with judgment, and neither man fully realized how many people were now paying attention. Near the courthouse entrance, a young judicial clerk stepped outside, carrying several case folders. As he walked toward the security checkpoint, his eyes briefly met Maya's. His pace slowed almost immediately. Something about her face seemed familiar. He frowned slightly, searching his memory while looking from Maya to the leather briefcase resting beside her. He had seen her somewhere before, not in passing, but in a place connected to his work. The memory remained just beyond reach. He continued walking a few more steps before stopping completely. Turning back toward Maya once again, he studied her carefully while the first spark of recognition quietly began to form, unaware that within moments the ordinary morning outside the courthouse would become impossible for anyone present to forget. The young judicial clerk remained frozen for a brief moment, his eyes fixed on Maya Johnson as forgotten details slowly returned to his memory. He had attended a case coordination meeting only 4 days earlier inside the federal courthouse, where photographs of every lead attorney scheduled for the month's highest-profile hearings had been displayed on a large conference screen. Maya had been one of them. At the time, she had quietly answered difficult procedural questions with remarkable confidence, earning respectful nods from senior judges and experienced attorneys alike. The clerk glanced quickly at the electronic docket resting inside the folder he carried. His eyes moved down the list until they reached the morning's first civil rights hearing. There it was. Maya Johnson, lead counsel. His heartbeat quickened. Before saying anything, he looked toward Officer Ryan Mitchell, who still stood firmly between Maya and the courthouse entrance. Ryan folded his arms once more, determined not to surrender the authority he believed he was exercising correctly. "Ma'am," he said, "until I complete this verification, you will remain here." Maya answered with the same calm voice that had never changed since the encounter began. "Officer, I understand your responsibility. I only hope the same standards are applied equally to everyone who approaches this courthouse." Her words were gentle, yet they carried enough weight to deepen the silence surrounding the marble plaza. A middle-aged attorney standing near the security checkpoint quietly looked around. During the past several minutes, dozens of people had entered the courthouse after ordinary security screening. None had been questioned beyond routine procedure. The contrast had become increasingly difficult to ignore. Officer Daniel Hayes shifted his weight slightly before speaking in a careful tone. "Ryan, perhaps Federal Courthouse Administration can verify her appointment. It would only take a minute." Ryan kept his attention on Maya. "I said I am handling it." Daniel nodded without arguing, but concern appeared across his face. Around them, more people gathered near the wide stone staircase. Reporters quietly adjusted microphones. Law students whispered among themselves. Several courthouse employees paused just inside the bronze entrance doors, watching through the glass without interfering. The atmosphere no longer resembled curiosity. It felt like everyone sensed that an important line between procedure and fairness was quietly being tested. Maya slowly reached inside her jacket pocket and removed a sealed envelope bearing the official emblem of the United States District Court. She held it respectfully with both hands. "Officer," she said, "this document contains confidential scheduling information. If courthouse policy authorizes you to review it, I will gladly cooperate. If not, I will present it directly to authorized court personnel." Ryan looked at the envelope but made no effort to accept it. His confidence had begun to compete with uncertainty, though he refused to admit it. The judicial clerk could remain silent no longer. He stepped forward respectfully, stopping several feet away from both of them. "Excuse me, officer," he said. Ryan turned toward him. "Yes." The clerk looked briefly at Maya before speaking. "I believe I recognize this woman from an official court preparation meeting earlier this week." Ryan frowned. "You are certain?" "Not completely," the clerk admitted honestly. "But I believe she may be connected to today's civil rights calendar." Ryan remained unconvinced. "Then we will verify that." Maya simply waited. She neither interrupted nor attempted to strengthen her own position. She trusted that facts carried enough strength without being pushed. High above the courthouse, the American flag moved steadily beneath the bright Chicago sky, while sunlight spread across the polished marble columns. The courthouse clock quietly marked 8:54. Only a few minutes remained before the first hearing of the morning. Inside the building, elevators opened and closed as judges, clerks, and attorneys prepared for another day of proceedings. Outside, time seemed to move more slowly. The senior attorney emerging from the courthouse entrance noticed the unusual crowd and paused halfway down the steps. His attention settled immediately on Maya. Recognition flickered across his face before surprise followed close behind. He looked from Maya to Officer Ryan Mitchell, then toward the judicial clerk standing nearby. Without saying a word, he He quietly turned back toward the courthouse doors and disappeared inside at a measured pace. None of the people watching understood why he had left so suddenly. But within the building, another conversation had already begun, one that would soon reach the highest office in the courthouse and change the course of the entire morning. The senior attorney disappeared behind the bronze courthouse doors with measured urgency, leaving the growing crowd outside wondering what had captured his attention so completely. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained standing between Maya Johnson and the security entrance, convinced that ending the encounter now would only suggest uncertainty where he believed confidence belonged. Yet the confidence he had carried only minutes earlier no longer felt as solid. Every answer Maya had given had been respectful. Every request had been honored. Every movement had reflected patience rather than resistance. Still, something inside him insisted that walking away now would mean admitting he had questioned the wrong person for the wrong reasons. Officer Daniel Hayes quietly watched his partner without speaking. He had worked beside Ryan for years and knew the subtle difference between professional caution and personal pride. The distinction was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Around the Marble Plaza, more attorneys slowed their pace after noticing the unusual gathering. Several federal employees stood just inside the courthouse entrance, looking through the glass with quiet concern. Reporters lowered their voices while camera operators adjusted their positions for a clearer view. Nobody shouted. Nobody interfered. The silence itself had become the loudest part of the morning. Maya gently closed the lid of her worn leather briefcase and fastened the brass clasps before lifting it back into her hands. She neither attempted to step around the officers nor questioned their authority. Instead, she waited with remarkable composure beneath the morning sunlight, allowing the law she respected to follow its proper course. She glanced briefly toward the courthouse clock. 8:56. The hearing would begin in only a few minutes. Months of preparation rested inside the briefcase she carried, yet no sign of frustration crossed her face. She remembered something her grandfather often repeated whenever life became unfair. Your character is revealed long before your accomplishments are. Those words had guided her through every difficult season of her life. They guided her now. Ryan noticed the brief glance toward the clock. Are you in a hurry? He asked. Maya answered honestly. Yes, officer. I have an important responsibility this morning. Then tell me exactly what it is, Ryan replied. Maya offered the same calm smile she had carried from the beginning. I will gladly explain it to the court officials authorized to receive that information. The answer contained neither defiance nor sarcasm. It simply respected the professional boundaries she had sworn to uphold. Daniel quietly exhaled. Even he recognized that every response from Maya reflected the same discipline expected from experienced legal professionals. Before anyone could speak again, the bronze courthouse doors opened once more. The senior attorney returned, accompanied by the clerk of court and two federal courthouse administrators. Their expressions remained composed, but their pace was noticeably faster than before. Conversations across the plaza immediately faded. The clerk of court looked directly toward Maya before turning politely to Officer Ryan Mitchell. Good morning, officer, she said with professional courtesy. May I ask what has delayed Ms. Johnson's entry into the courthouse? Ryan answered carefully. Routine verification. The clerk of court nodded once. Has she refused any lawful request? No. Has she failed to provide identification? No. Has she violated courthouse policy? Ryan hesitated for the briefest moment. Not that I have observed. The administrator standing beside the clerk quietly exchanged a glance with the senior attorney. Neither interrupted. Maya remained silent, refusing to influence the conversation. Her eyes rested on the courthouse entrance rather than on the gathering crowd. She understood that truth rarely needed assistance once the proper people had the opportunity to see it. A light breeze carried the sound of rustling leaves across the polished stone plaza, while sunlight reflected brightly from the courthouse windows. Several law students standing near the security checkpoint quietly lowered their phones, sensing that the moment unfolding before them had become something far more meaningful than a viral video. The clerk of court looked toward Maya with unmistakable recognition before returning her attention to Officer Mitchell. Officer, she said gently, there are individuals inside this building waiting for Ms. Johnson to begin proceedings that affect people throughout this district. Ryan felt every eye around him settle quietly in his direction. For the first time that morning, he realized this encounter had grown beyond a simple stop outside the courthouse. Somewhere inside the building, another set of footsteps echoed across the marble hallway, slow, measured, and unmistakably authoritative, moving steadily toward the entrance as the final piece of the morning's truth prepared to reveal itself. The courthouse clock quietly marked 8:58, as though every passing second carried unusual significance. The bustling energy that normally filled the entrance had dissolved into remarkable stillness. Conversations faded into whispers. Even the rolling sound of wheeled briefcases across the polished marble seemed distant beneath the gentle movement of the American flag high above the courthouse roof. Maya Johnson stood exactly where she had remained since the encounter began. Her worn leather briefcase rested comfortably in one hand, while the sealed court envelope remained untouched in the other. She neither stepped forward nor attempted to defend herself further. She understood something many people spend a lifetime learning. Truth never became stronger because it was spoken louder. It became stronger because it remained steady. A cool autumn breeze crossed the plaza, lifting a handful of amber leaves that drifted slowly across the white stone before settling near the courthouse steps. Warm sunlight reflected from the bronze entrance doors, surrounding the entire entrance with a quiet, golden glow. Maya lifted her eyes toward the flag for only a brief moment. She remembered standing beneath another flag years earlier with her late father outside a neighborhood courthouse after he had completed jury service. She had asked him whether justice always won. He smiled before answering with words that had guided every important decision in her life. Justice depends on ordinary people choosing fairness before pride. At the time, she had been too young to appreciate the meaning. Standing outside the federal courthouse now, those words returned with extraordinary clarity. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained only a few feet away. The certainty that had shaped every decision during the past 20 minutes had slowly begun giving way to something unfamiliar. He replayed each exchange in silence. Maya had obeyed every lawful instruction. She had presented identification immediately. She had answered every question with courtesy. She had never raised her voice, challenged his authority, or attempted to embarrass him before the growing crowd. Yet he continued searching for a reason to justify keeping her there. The realization settled heavily across his thoughts. The explanation he wanted simply did not exist. Officer Daniel Hayes quietly watched both of them without speaking. He noticed Ryan no longer questioning Maya. Instead, his partner seemed trapped inside his own reflection, recognizing that confidence built upon assumption became increasingly difficult to defend once facts quietly entered the conversation. The clerk of court folded her hands patiently while waiting. The senior attorney remained beside her, saying nothing. The courthouse administrators stood respectfully nearby. None of them attempted to pressure the officer. Procedure still mattered. Respect still mattered. They simply allowed time to reveal what. Hurried emotions, often concealed. Around the plaza, dozens of strangers remained unusually silent. A young law student lowered her phone and slipped it into her pocket. An elderly veteran removed his cap and held it respectfully at his side. A television photographer slowly lowered his camera, sensing that the most powerful part of the story could never be measured by dramatic images alone. It lived inside the quiet dignity of the woman who had refused to answer prejudice with bitterness. Maya closed her eyes for one calm breath before opening them again. She quietly whispered words no one else could hear. Lead with character. It was not a prayer asking for victory. It was a reminder of the promise she made to herself every morning before entering a courtroom. Whatever happened next, she would never allow another person's judgment to rewrite her own values. Ryan heard only the breeze moving across the courthouse plaza. He looked beyond Maya toward the waiting entrance where attorneys, court employees, and visitors stood together without impatience or complaint. Every face reflected the same expectation. Not outrage, not celebration, simply the hope that fairness would guide whatever happened next. The bronze doors opened once more. Measured footsteps echoed from the marble hallway inside, deliberate and unhurried, carrying the unmistakable confidence of someone whose presence alone commanded quiet respect. The clerk of court straightened slightly. The senior attorney stepped aside. Even Officer Daniel Hayes instinctively shifted his posture. Maya remained exactly where she was, her expression peaceful, her shoulders relaxed, her confidence untouched. She did not need to announce who she was. She did not need to remind anyone why she had come. The truth had already begun walking toward the courthouse entrance long before the person who would finally speak it reached the top of the marble steps. The first words came from the end of the marble hallway before the man himself appeared. "Ms. Johnson, the court has been waiting for you." The calm, unmistakable voice carried across the courthouse entrance with effortless authority, causing every conversation on the plaza to disappear at once. The Chief Judge of the United States District Court stepped through the towering bronze doors accompanied by 2 courtroom deputies, the clerk of court, and several senior attorneys carrying thick case files. Morning sunlight reflected across the polished stone beneath their feet, while the American flag continued moving gently above the courthouse roof. Officer Ryan Mitchell immediately straightened his posture. Years of professional training guided him into a respectful greeting. "Good morning, Your Honor." The Chief Judge acknowledged the greeting with a courteous nod before turning directly toward Maya Johnson. A warm expression replaced the serious concentration that had been visible only moments earlier. "Ms. Johnson," he said, "I was beginning to think Chicago traffic had finally defeated the most punctual attorney appearing before this court." Maya offered a quiet smile filled with professionalism rather than relief. "I apologize for the delay, Your Honor." The Chief Judge looked briefly toward Officer Mitchell before returning his attention to Maya. "Delay?" he asked gently. Before Maya could answer, the clerk of court spoke with measured respect. "There has been an extended identification inquiry outside the entrance, Your Honor." The judge slowly shifted his attention toward Officer Mitchell. His voice remained calm, free from accusation or impatience. "Officer, may I ask whether Ms. Johnson has refused to cooperate with any lawful request?" Ryan answered honestly. "No, Your Honor." "Has she failed to provide identification?" "No, Your Honor." "Has she violated any courthouse policy?" Ryan hesitated before quietly answering. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps I should explain why so many people inside this building have been waiting for her arrival." The plaza became completely silent. Even the reporters stopped adjusting their cameras. Every eye focused on the conversation unfolding beneath the courthouse columns. The Chief Judge continued in the same steady voice. "Ms. Maya Johnson serves as lead counsel in the constitutional civil rights case scheduled to begin in my courtroom this morning. For nearly 2 years, she has worked alongside attorneys, educators, community leaders, and legal scholars preparing recommendations that may improve public trust, strengthen constitutional training, and reinforce equal treatment under the law throughout this district." A ripple of quiet surprise moved through the crowd. Several attorneys exchanged knowing glances. The young judicial clerk lowered his eyes with relief, realizing his memory had been correct. Officer Daniel Hayes slowly looked toward Maya with newfound admiration. Throughout the entire encounter, she had never once mentioned her title, her accomplishments, or the importance of the hearing waiting inside. She had chosen humility instead of self-promotion. The Chief Judge looked toward Maya once more. "You could have identified yourself at any point." Maya answered softly. "Your Honor, respect for the law should never depend upon someone knowing my profession." Those few words settled over the courthouse plaza with greater force than any raised voice ever could. The Chief Judge smiled almost imperceptibly before turning back toward Officer Mitchell. "Officer, authority earns lasting respect only when it is exercised with fairness, patience, and equal treatment. Every citizen approaching these doors deserves those same principles before entering a courtroom." The statement contained no anger and no public humiliation. It simply expressed the responsibility carried by everyone entrusted with public service. Ryan felt the full weight of the morning settle upon him. He replayed every question he had asked, every assumption he had made, and every opportunity Maya had quietly offered him to reconsider. She had never challenged his dignity. She had protected it even while her own was being tested. Maya calmly lifted her worn leather briefcase, thanked the officers with genuine courtesy, and prepared to enter the courthouse. Before following the Chief Judge inside, she looked briefly toward Officer Mitchell. There was no triumph in her expression, no satisfaction, no resentment, only quiet grace. Around them, the crowd instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path toward the entrance. Nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. The only sound came from the courthouse clock striking 9 as warm sunlight filled the marble steps, revealing that the strongest victory that morning had never belonged to power. It belonged to character. The heavy courtroom doors closed softly behind Maya Johnson, yet the quiet she left outside remained standing on the courthouse plaza long after she disappeared into the building. Officer Ryan Mitchell did not move. The polished marble beneath his feet felt strangely unfamiliar, as though the place he had patrolled for years had suddenly become a mirror reflecting decisions he had never questioned before. Around him, the crowd slowly began returning to ordinary routines. Attorneys checked the time and continued toward scheduled hearings. Jurors quietly entered the security line. Reporters lowered their microphones, realizing the most powerful part of the morning had not been a dramatic confrontation, but the extraordinary restraint of a woman who had answered prejudice with dignity. Officer Daniel Hayes remained beside his partner without speaking. After several long moments, Ryan finally broke the silence. "She had every opportunity to embarrass me." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "She chose something better." Ryan looked toward the courthouse entrance where Maya had disappeared only moments earlier. Every answer she had given replayed in his mind with painful clarity. She had cooperated immediately. She had remained respectful. She had never attempted to use her professional position to gain special treatment. She had simply expected to receive the same fairness every citizen deserved. The realization settled heavily across his thoughts. For years he had believed experience guaranteed sound judgment. That morning had shown him something entirely different. Experience without humility could quietly become assumption. Inside the courthouse, Maya entered the courtroom with the same calm professionalism she had carried from the first moment she arrived outside the building. The chief judge briefly acknowledged the unexpected delay before inviting counsel to begin. Maya neither mentioned the incident nor requested additional time. She organized her files, thanked the court staff, and proceeded with carefully prepared arguments that reflected months of disciplined work. Everyone inside the courtroom focused on the law, exactly as she believed they should. Several days later, the federal courthouse completed routine documentation concerning the unusual delay outside the entrance. Witness statements, security observations, and official reports were forwarded through established administrative channels. Because the incident involved courthouse access and interactions with the public, the police department's Professional Standards Division initiated a formal review according to departmental policy. The process remained professional, deliberate, and based upon documented facts rather than public opinion. Ryan attended every meeting without interruption. He watched body camera footage showing Maya's patience, courtesy, and complete cooperation from beginning to end. Listening to his own questions from the recording proved far more difficult than he expected. For the first time, he heard the difference between legitimate procedure and conclusions shaped before evidence existed. The review determined that his conduct failed to meet departmental expectations regarding impartial public interactions. As a result, he lost his courthouse assignment and the promotion for which he had recently been recommended. The decision spread quietly through the department. Some officers viewed it as disappointing. Others recognized it as an important reminder that public trust depended upon accountability as much as authority. Maya learned about the administrative outcome nearly a week later when a local reporter respectfully approached her after another hearing. "Ms.